Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Lawyer Interviews. I'm your host, Cynthia, and joining us today is Ryan Stygar, or Attorney Ryan. Ryan is an employment and labor lawyer based in California. Ryan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So, Ryan, I can see that you're also a digital creator. So, I would definitely like to discuss more about that today. But first, I would like to talk about how you got to where you are today. So, you were a firefighter and then you decided to become a lawyer. Could you share with us why you made this career change?
Absolutely. I'm not sure I've met another firefighter who became a lawyer yet. If one's out there, I'd love to meet them because most people don't leave the fire service. It's a great career. Um, I put in about almost 5 years. I was in Cal Fire. I was in Southern California. It was probably the greatest adventure and experience of my life. And having that blue collar background, I feel has made me a better workers' rights attorney because I know what it feels like to work very hard and not make a lot of money. I know what it feels like to be part of a union, and I know also what it's like when your union isn't stepping up for you. I was part of Cal Fire during a difficult time. We were coming right out of the recession. We were understaffed, underpaid, morale was very low. But it was during that time as a firefighter that I got to see what the union was trying to do to be better. They knew that raises weren't coming, benefits weren't good, morale was low, and they were actively fighting to get a better deal for our firefighters. And I got to see that negotiation. I worked with a fire chief and I was helping him with some of his materials, and I thought, wow, this is really cool. Together, we can advocate for our brothers and sisters in the service and give them more money, better quality of life, better benefits. It starts right here. And that's where the seed started. At that point, I didn't realize that I was getting infected with the workers' rights bug, but that's where it started.
So, you just decided to take the risk, all that experience and start from scratch, I would say, almost like getting into law school and the process. So, is it your experience as a firefighter, like witnessing everything that you've witnessed, is that what made you want to pursue employment and labor law specifically?
I said the seed was planted and I didn't really know that it was there at first. I was excited more about, how laws and knowledge of the law can make someone's life better. So when I first went into law school, first of all, I was terrified. Quick advice to anyone in their mid 20s who thinks that they've messed up their life and they've made all the wrong decisions. It's not too late, and you're not nearly as old as you think you are. At 24, 25 years old, I really thought that I was going to be a firefighter my whole life. And even when I started to think, hey, I'm not as happy as I thought I was going to be, this career isn't giving me the lifestyle I want. Um, I thought, well, it's too late. I'm 25. I'm an old man. It's silly to think now. But I talked to people who loved me and I got some really candid advice and I was honest with myself and I made the switch. I will say, having gone into fire, which is an exceptionally competitive career to break into, uh, it's very difficult to get hired. You can expect to do dozens of interviews before you land a position. Having gone into that, I got used to the challenges of trying to learn new things quickly and being told no at every step. So I think it gave me the stamina I needed to get through law school and not lose my enthusiasm when things got hard. Because I'll tell you what, I went into law school thinking maybe I'd be intellectual property lawyer or maybe a criminal justice attorney. Um, but that's not how things worked out. And I'm so glad I had an open mind. And I'm glad I rolled with punches instead of fighting things. When opportunities came, I took them. And now I'm the happiest I've ever been.
And that's great to hear because that's important experience. And I know we all have that pressure to rush through our careers, but I believe that when you have that experience, when you have a previous degree or a previous life before law school, it gives you more direction and almost gives you that perseverance to keep going and never look back.
Yeah, everyone's in such a hurry. If I had my way, the Forbes 30 under 30 list wouldn't exist because we're rushing things. And I tell people like, how does a pot roast taste if you rush it? You got to season it. You got to slow cook it. And there's no shortcut to character development. Some people are naturally very gifted and very talented, and we see them doing great things at a young age, but that's not a realistic standard. The reality is becoming the best version of yourself and becoming a great attorney and a great advocate, it takes time. It takes an accumulation of life experiences, not just, oh, I've been to hearings, I've written motions, I've taken 100 depositions, but the real life, like, hey, I've experienced what it's like to work for minimum wage, and I know how hard it is to make ends meet. I know what it's like when I'm sitting there looking at an arbitration agreement and my boss says I'm fired if I don't sign it. Understanding where your clients are coming from, and the only way to really understand is through life experience. It makes you a better advocate. So I'll say it one more time to beat the dead horse. If you're in your 20s listening to this thing and you think, wow, I've messed up, I'm out of time, look at my friends, they're making six figures, you have time. Be patient with yourself. Don't rush the pot roast.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. And so you've experienced both sides. Could you tell us the reasons why, a lot of employers, they push back on the idea of their workplace becoming unionized?
Well, there's a lot of reasons for that because, it's true. Once your workplace unionizes, your labor costs are going to go up. And the reason they're going to go up is because you can't pick off your workers one at a time anymore. Okay. They've formed together and made a pack. It's collective bargaining. So now you're dealing with a unit of workers who are going to work together to get benefits, better pay, better work conditions. Uh, Employers resist this because they see the initial cost. I think there's a lot of large corporations out there, and I think Starbucks is probably the poster child for this right now. They don't realize that your frontline troops on the ground are the ones delivering your customer experience. They're the ones keeping your store running. And if you have happy employees and you invest in your employees, you're going to make more money. But instead, some employers dig in and they're so afraid of unions and they're so afraid of the upfront costs that they will spend millions of dollars a month in legal fees just fighting unions. It's craziness. And here's something that it's not a popular opinion, but it's true. The best way to avoid having your workplace unionize, don't create a situation where people feel like collective bargaining is their only way. Make them feel valued, and you're not going to have big legal fights with unions. Treat people right. It's really that simple.
And this is great advice because I did see in one of your videos, which had 1.2 million views, you discuss mandatory pizza party at work. And then you say that the hardest
Yeah.
job that you have to do is undoing years of misinformation from bad bosses. So do you believe that workers are being exploited when they are not being made aware of their rights?
100%. Ignorance is a bad boss's most powerful weapon. A bad boss, in my mind, is someone who is very ignorant but very confident. They will say ignorant, incorrect things like, this is a right to work state, and I'll fire you for any reason I want. First of all, right to work means that you have the right to work for an employer, and union membership can't be mandatory. That's all it means. And that's about half the states. That boss may be thinking of at will employment, which is the rule in 49 states, but you still have laws. Still, you can't fire people illegally. And just because you fired someone illegally and said it was for some other reason, that's no different from robbing a store and saying, I didn't do it. We can still prove you did. So, yeah, fighting that is really hard. I think, especially in the past 10 years, we've seen a massive increase in interest in collective bargaining, interest in unions, and also with social media. There's so much free information. No one has to pay me two, three, $400 and sit in my office to learn their rights. I'm on this every day trying to tell people their rights for free. So this trend is going to continue, and it's going to get harder and harder for bad bosses to take advantage.
And so what do you gain from posting this information for free? What is your motivation?
Quite a bit. At first, it was because I was a scrappy solo practitioner and I needed to let the world know who I was, what my expertise was, and hopefully generate some business. It evolved. The reception I got to this information was out of control. I honestly thought that it would be like any other lawyer ad, and if someone needed me, they call me. But instead, and this has been probably the most wonderful surprise I've had in many years, the community started getting together and I'd talk about things like, hey, this is what happens when you request maternity leave. Here's how you protect yourself. Here's what HR might do. And people hop in my comments and they say, oh my God, this happened to me. This happened to my mom. I didn't know I was allowed to do this. I didn't know they couldn't do that. And I realized there was this massive need. So the support from the community, even without my firm, I would still do this. It's been incredibly fun. And it's also brought me closer to other workers' rights lawyers, true believers, not just, lawyers trying to get a case, but people who are like, yeah, like we have businesses and we do cases and we look for clients, but we also really believe in the mission here because every workers' rights attorney I've met who's really good at their job has either been in the service industry or blue collar or has some bad experience in prior career and really empathizes. So what's been the big upshot of the social media? uh, the community, 100%. And yes, the clients are fantastic and it's great, but this thing has grown well beyond what I initially thought it would be.
And you share very valuable information, that information that everyone should have access to. So that makes me wonder, in your opinion, what is it going to take, and really now, to close that gap and that power imbalance between management and employees?
Well, there's two sides to the coin, I think. Well, two sides to the equation, I should say more accurately. The first side is knowledge. We got to get the knowledge. They do not teach you this stuff in school. They teach you long division for reasons I don't understand. We all have calculators, and it's not like doing long division by hand is going to save your life in the wilderness. I don't know why we teach that anymore. We should be teaching technological literacy, financial literacy, basic citizenship. What are taxes? How do I pay them? What's a job? What are my rights in a job? Um, Unless formal education has a radical change, the future forward is going to be through social media, digital content that people can seek out and control. Basically saying, I'm an employee. What are the rules of the game? When I go work for someone, what are the rules? What are the laws that protect me? Because what a lot of employees don't realize is this is a business relationship and it's governed by rules and your employer has to follow those rules and you don't have to be afraid of your employer. We have laws that protect you from retaliation, so it is not only safe but smart to learn your rights. The other side of the equation, communication. Knowledge is nothing if it just sits in your head and gathers dust. We need collective concerted effort between employees, learning about our rights, learning strategies for bargaining for a better way of life. And if employers stop fighting it and see it for what it is, it's just people looking for a better deal. They're not trying to take anything that's yours. They just want a better deal. And if we approach things from that side, I really think that it's going to do more to help workers and to limit poverty and to increase upward mobility than anyone expects.
And that's a good point, because at the end of the day, there are a lot of workplaces that are not unionized. So
Mhm.
a lot of them, they just accept their conditions because, oh, that's what management told me to accept. They don't ask
Yeah,
around.
it's tough because it's not their fault. I mean, it once a shark isolates a fish from the school, it's very easy for the shark to eat that fish. That's why we got to stay together. And again, it's why a lot of employers don't like unions, and it's why places like Starbucks are willing to destroy their own reputation and goodwill to fight these unions. Um, I think Starbucks is misguided. I would love to sit down and room with them and explain, look, here's how much money you are spending fighting this union. And the unions are going to happen. They're spreading like wildfire because the funny thing about unions is they're like a beach ball you're pushing under a pool. The more you fight them, the more people realize how bad they need it, and it just pops back up. The more you try to crush unions, the more workers realize, oh God, we really need a union because you're not looking out for us. You're trying to keep us isolated and keep our pay low. So that's going to be a trend that continues. And I hope that eventually big corporations get the message. But for now, I'm just going to keep making my videos.
Oh, and they're very useful, because I also find that, this notion of speaking up, and
Mhm.
that's really important, that okay, you know your rights, but also what you mentioned about the communication is like, now that you know your rights, do you feel comfortable to speak up?
I think exposure, and I really hope, I know I can be controversial and my content makes a lot of people upset, but for the people who are experiencing difficulties at work, I hope they see me speaking up and say, do you know what? I can do that. I've watched Attorney Ryan. I know my rights. I know I have a right to discuss pay and work conditions at work. I know I have a right to discuss unions and union activity. I know that I have the right to be free from retaliation. And just because the boss makes up the reason I'm fired doesn't mean it's the real reason. I can speak up too. So I hope that people have been watching my videos over the years and have gone to work and said, "Hey, I'm making 17.50 an hour. What's Jane making? She's making less. Has she talked to the boss?" There's a lot of things we can do to help each other because it's not a zero-sum game. We all benefit when work conditions are improved. We all benefit when everyone's happy at work.
That's true. And I want to personally thank you for putting that content out there because that is
Thanks.
a great contribution to society. I think that, when we have this content out there, we understand better our rights because we're not going to go and research what other people are doing, or it's just time consuming. And already when we look at the expectations of management versus what we're being offered in return, it makes me wonder if quiet quitting is the new thing now. So you also, you when you went on Dr. Phil, you discussed the idea of quiet quitting. So what exactly is quiet quitting?
Quiet quitting is the world's best misnomer. It's simply doing the job you were paid to do within the schedule you were hired to do it. It is a rejection of the hardcore hustle culture. It is a rejection of going above and beyond in the hopes of a return. Because millennials, especially, and Gen Z, we're starting to see now, they didn't come up in the ultra prosperous economy that the boomers came up in. We didn't have this, hey, if you work hard, things are going to go well for you. The generation that's coming of age in the 2000s, 2010s, and now the 2020s are experiencing a historic affordability crisis. We are experiencing structural failures that make it very difficult for people to make a living. So quiet quitting is this final, hey, do you know what? I'm not lazy. I'm not a slacker. I'm going to do my job and I'm going to do it well. But if you think for 1 minute that I'm going to burn an extra 2 hours unpaid after work in the office, you're out of your damn mind because I can barely make rent as it is. Might as well go be with my dog and enjoy my evening.
You also mentioned when you posted that interview that you didn't see eye to eye with Dr. Phil regarding that topic. So what were the main points of disagreement?
Well, I think that we're speaking two different languages. It was two generations clashing, and I think one side just didn't hear the other because they insisted that, oh, you have to work hard, be your best self, look at all the opportunity. I think they're speaking from a point of privilege. I understand that these are all very successful people who worked very hard to get there. I worked hard to get where I am, but I don't pretend for 1 minute that hard work and talent alone got me where I am. I did have privileges and opportunities. You're looking at me right now. I'm a white man. I'm tall. I grew up in California. That alone is a lottery ticket. And it really bothers me when people with benefits like what I have look down on someone and say, well, you need to learn a skill. You need to go to school. You need to apply yourself. Stop asking for handouts. Stop being a crybaby. That is ignorance to the highest extent. And I think people who say those things need to meet more human beings and see what it's really like out there. So, what's the divide? Boomers really do believe that hard work is the chief currency in a career. You need it, but I don't think it's the chief currency. I think having a value driven life where we do things that make us happy is important. I think that if you tell people, like Dr. Phil said, that, hey, you need to really give 110% at work so that you get recognized, I reject that. A lot of times the hardest worker in the room is not the person who gets promoted. That's not what moves you up the ranks. In fact, there is such a thing as being too valuable to promote, where if you work hard and work quietly in your little niche, no one actually notices you because your department just functions and there's no incentive to move you up. A lot of the bosses that push back on this, they keep screaming hard work, but I also challenge them to be honest with me. Be honest. It's not that you don't think people are working hard. You don't care about that. It's that they're not working hard for you. It's that they're not doing free overtime for you, free extra duties for you. Uh, at least be honest about that part and we can have a conversation. So I did get a lot of angry emails, a lot of angry DMs. I got some phone calls. Some people really liked the episode. A lot of people think I'm destroying America. I think that's a bit extreme, but it was controversial.
I must say that it's true. They feed us this idea of seniority. And it's like,
Mhm.
okay, when it comes to the promotion, are you giving it to the most qualified individual, even though they're, let's say, 2, 3 years in the company versus the person that was just there for 15 years doing the bare minimum? And this is my question to you. Like, what's your opinion on the idea of seniority?
I think we need to ask ourselves, how did the senior people become senior? And don't take their word for it. Really observe, because if you ask them, they're all going to give you some rags to riches. Oh, I worked my way up from the bottom story. And 99% of the time, it's a bullshit story. They're lying. They're lying to themselves because they don't want to feel they owe anyone anything because being indebted doesn't feel good. Admitting that you have privilege, admitting that maybe you got a little lucky doesn't feel good. Also admitting that Your competence is not quite there. It's your confidence that got you there, or perhaps who your father was or who you were friends with. I mean, I'll be honest, when I got my first job with Cal Fire, very competitive. 800 people applied for 11 roles at this time. There were 11 openings, 800 applicants. I know for a fact that I was one of the 11 to get hired, not because I was most qualified. I was one of the youngest and least experienced. I got hired because when I was a volunteer firefighter, I was a personal assistant to one of the battalion chiefs on the hiring committee. And for 3 months, this man worked with me. I made his meals. I did his laundry. I organized his truck. I set his calendar. I was his go-to person to make his life easier. And then when he saw my name on that hiring list, he thought, I know this guy. I already like him. I already trust him. And yeah, 8 years less experience than maybe the next guy, but I know him. That's what gets people in the door. It really is. Overwhelmingly, that's what gets into the door. So talking about putting your head down, working your way up the ladder, there's some value to that. I get it. You got to earn your stripes. I'm not saying don't do that, but I am saying if you really want to be senior and move up in your organization, you need to pay attention to the things that actually get you there. Networking, not being afraid to go to people in power and try to get in with them. And also being honest and saying, hey, if I put in some time in an organization, I feel like an outsider. I'm not being welcomed. I'm not getting opportunities to find mentors and go up. You need to move because if it's not clicking, it's not clicking. Don't waste valuable years.
And that's true. And also people skills. It's like you could be good at what
Mhm.
you do and not be likable, and no one's going to want to work with you.
Yeah. It's tough because I see this all the time. I do have sort of a boutique career advice side of my business where I help people navigate the most difficult problems at work. And Cynthia, I can't tell you how many times I see someone says, I work so hard. I'm the top producing person. I'm the best. I got the best numbers. I got the best performance reviews. They never give me a management shot. And I'm not invited to parties and I'm not invited to weekends. And people are mean to me and I don't understand. And it's like, well, for starters, you might be a threat. People are going to be threatened by exceptional confidence, but it's a mistake to tell yourself, well, they're just threatened by me and I don't care about them. If they don't care about me, I'm going to return their energy with energy. You're just perpetuating the toxicity. At some point, you're going to have to figure out ways to engage with people in a non threatening way because being the most competent isn't going to get you there. Being someone who is a good person to know in your organization, that's going to get you there. One of the easiest things you can do if you find, hey, I feel kind of isolated at work. I feel like when I tell a joke, people cringe, or when I tell a story, I see their eyes wander. They look at their phone. They don't listen to me. It is enough to be present and pleasant. Next time you're doing a work meeting or something, don't feel the pressure to say something just to be heard. Try a couple weeks. Be present, be pleasant. Smile, listen, and see how those relationships improve. There's no cure all, but the idea here is if you can just be a little strategic and be present and pleasant, you might get some more opportunities than you were having by just being a hard worker.
And that's great advice. And you're in a very great position to be speaking about this because I can also see that you opened your own law firm and you operate fully remotely. So, can you tell us why you decided to take that route?
Absolutely. Now, I will say it's more like 98% remotely because we do have, some judges aren't doing the remote hearings anymore. I mean, most of them are. Some depositions have to be in person, but yeah, we're overwhelmingly remote. Um, I was not remote at start. At start, I was a solo practitioner. I kind of had some assistants here and there. Um, but what I found was we can attract fantastic talent going remote. Not only that, the buy-in from the attorneys I hire is huge. I only hire people who have an entrepreneurial spirit where I really believe they could go out and open their own firm if they wanted to, but we have such great chemistry, it makes sense for us to work together. Those are the kinds of people I hire. They're independent, and all they need is a little freedom. There's no need for my attorneys to spend an hour on the road commuting to my office just so I can watch them. I hired these people because I trust them. I hired them because they exercise extreme ownership of their cases and they're true believers. They know that we're not just fighting for a bottom line on a spreadsheet. We're fighting for real human beings who had their rights violated at work. And so if you want to have a full remote office, it's going to start with the kind of people you have and the kind of culture. Do you have true believers? Do you have people who, but whatever your practice is, medical malpractice, criminal justice, whatever it is, do you have true believers? Do the people feel they have ownership? In addition to the base, all of my attorneys get a piece of every case they settle, no matter how small and no matter how big. Everyone gets a piece. You can't have a fully remote office that functions well without true believers who have a sense of ownership. I think that's my big overwhelming piece of advice to anyone who's thinking of going full remote. And the benefits are extraordinary. They're extraordinary. I'm more comfortable. I love my home office. My employees are more comfortable. We still get together. We have time and we get together and have dinners and have events together. We get along great. There's really not a loss of, oh, where's the camaraderie? It's there. Um, and my overhead was drastically reduced when I went to remote. It's just so much cheaper.
What you're describing is that flexibility. So, what's your
Mhm.
opinion on employers who are pushing for their employees to go back into the office versus offering more flexible work from home arrangements?
I have trouble understanding it. I think it might be an ego thing and a trust thing because what's the point of them being in that office, especially when managers aren't there? That's what really grinds my gears is we have a lot of senior partners and other law firm owners who insist that their employees be in the office while they're off, on the French Riviera tuning in from a Zoom or they're zooming in from their luxury condo in a completely different town. You got to walk the walk. Look, my firm is growing fast and we might switch to a hybrid model that's still going to be primarily remote, but we might have, hey, every once in a while we come into the office and have all hands, so we can see each other. We might do that, but that's going to be something that my I'm going to let my employees kind of say, hey, we'd like this. You know, there's the old adage that the harder you grip, the more slips through your fingers. If you want to chase your most talented attorneys away, go ahead and force them to do things that not only they don't want to do, but that they've proved to you over 2 years is not necessary. The numbers don't lie. My firm makes more money. We make more money full remote. Now, there's a lot of factors that probably contribute that, but why would I switch? Why would I force people to go into an office when they are happier and making more money and getting better results? If you have a sort of nostalgia, like, oh, we miss the office, we miss the way things were. I miss my corner office where I got to look out into the cubicles and feel important. That's a you problem because at the end of the day, your ego is not a business decision.
And you're right about the trust aspect. It's like, okay, so
Mhm.
if you don't trust the people you work with and you feel that need to supervise them, then you've hired wrong.
Why are
It's
you hiring
just
people you don't trust?
exactly. The pandemic has really changed the way we work. So it has it's been proven that companies can function working remotely. So why are we going back steps?
More than function remotely, they can make record profits. Everyone wants to pretend that it was some sort of policy decision, it was COVID relief payments, it was benefits to working class people. That's not what caused inflation. What caused inflation was injecting trillions of low and zero interest capital into institutions. And during that time, we had a massive shock to the cultural inertia of the United States, which was you wake up early, you commute to the office, you get your coffee, you have your meeting, you're in the cubicle. And it took something as extreme as COVID to shake everyone and say, you have to try something different. You have to, because in person's not an option, not right now. And then to everyone's surprise, it worked. It worked. People are just as effective sending emails from their couch as they are from a cubicle. In fact, sometimes they're more because they have more energy and they're happier. So I think the lesson of COVID is, first of all, you shouldn't be afraid to try new things, even if they seem very extreme, because COVID necessitated an extreme experiment, which paid off wonderfully. Uh, I think people who want to go back to the time before, they need to be honest about what life was really like back then. I worked in a cubicle garden. No one was functional until they'd been in that office at least an hour and a half. You're tired, you're cranky, give people what they need to feel healthy. I don't care when you start work. I don't care. Start at 7 a.m., start at 10. Wrap up at 5, wrap up at 6. I don't care. One of my top associates who's been with me the longest, she does Pilates every morning. And I know that most mornings she didn't start work till 10. I don't care. She absolutely crushed it this month. She's doing great. Why would I mess up a good thing?
And that's a good point because we don't all function the same way. So you need to work at the times where you are the most productive. And if employers don't understand that, that's basic biology, I would almost say.
Yeah, it is. And it comes from, the 8-hour work week comes from a different time. It comes from a time where many workers were going into a factory, perhaps, and you literally did get more value per employee, and it was a ratio of how much time they spent working for you. Well, that's not the case anymore. With technology, you don't need someone in a physical building 8 hours a day to do their job. In fact, most workers are not productive a full 8 hours. It's not because this generation is lazy. It's not because there's something wrong with that person. You nailed it, Cynthia. I'm so glad you said it. It's biology. And all of the productivity studies I've seen, in an 8-hour day, the average office worker is only productive maybe three of it, maybe 3 hours. The rest of it is very slow pace, distracted by useless meetings. The manager needs something to do because let's be honest, most middle managers are unnecessary. So they call people into meetings and distract. So when we go to the remote model, the impromptu unnecessary meetings drastically go down. You're not just pulling people out of their cubicle and into the boardroom to have a meeting about nothing. It's there. People are a little more protected with their time, and also I would rather have 3 quality hours from someone like, hey, really hit hard, crank out that motion, crank out that evidence we need, go get those witnesses on the phone, do your thing for 3 solid focused hours. That's worth more than 8 slow hours to me. The intensity and the productivity is what you need to look at, not the time.
I completely agree. And as you know, the pandemic has brought a lot of challenges for employment
Mhm.
and labor lawyers. So, my last question is, if you had to predict the next biggest challenge for employment and labor lawyers, what would it be?
Well, that's a broad brush. So let's start with the very basics. Interest in collective bargaining is at an all-time high and getting higher. If you are a single event employment lawyer, you need to start getting familiar with union issues. I know a lot of attorneys, just because of the procedural hurdles, they shy away when they see public entity and union issues. You need to get familiar with it because it's only going to go up. And it's a good thing. It's a good thing. We want better conditions for workers. So you need to stay on top of that. You're also going to want to pay attention to politics. And a lot of lawyers, they say, oh, we don't get political in our advertisements. We want to appeal to the widest body possible. As lawyers, our jobs are fundamentally political. You need to be paying attention to things like, hey, what's the minimum wage in my state? What's changing? What are people's labor rights? A really controversial rule in California is the Private Attorney General Act, which allows attorneys like me to pursue actions that typically would be enforced by the state. You basically get deputized by the state to enforce its labor code. It's been very productive in California because it helps hold employers accountable for violations where the recovery is pretty small and most attorneys wouldn't touch it. I think if other states did that, we would have a higher quality of life for workers. So if you want to really nail it as a labor and employment lawyer, get comfortable understanding unions and public entity, get political. You're not just a lawyer, you're a workers' rights advocate. Get political. And if people don't like it, those aren't your clients.
And these are great insights. And I can't wait to go back to this episode and see if it's going to come into reality.
Oh yeah. Oh, and brace yourself. I've got quite a bit of haters out there. It's some of them are just bad bosses who don't like that their position is being challenged. Other people, it's maybe they've worked a job and they've been miserable for so long that finally someone is saying, "Hey, it doesn't have to be that way." Maybe they have regret. Maybe, there's a lot of struggles people have where they tend to lash out at me. But I hope that the overwhelming number of listeners sees this as a positive thing. We're learning our rights. We're fighting for a better deal. We're not afraid to get political. We're not afraid to speak truth to power. And if we keep working together, we're all going to make more money. We're all going to be happier. It's a good thing.
It is. And I want to thank you so much for taking the time to share your great advice and tips and strategies and everything about employment and labor law. I'm pretty sure we could have fit much more if we had more time, but definitely we should do a part two. I'm
Oh,
thinking
I'd
part
be happy
two.
to. Anytime.
I'm thinking
Anytime you
part
guys
two.
give me a call.
And
Love it.
for those who are watching, thank you so much again. And please don't hesitate to leave your comments below and to subscribe to our YouTube channel. See you next time.